We are at this meeting validating a policy document that tries to manage Nigeria's animal resources. As we are aware, animals are among the natural endowments for which millions of Nigerians depend for livelihoods. And there is the need to manage the development of the Nigerian animal and livestock resources, to promote it to attain sustainable development, and to ensure the conservation of the biodiversity of the Nigerian's animal resources. And this effort by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and other stakeholders for convening this meeting to develop this policy is in line with the best global practices. Additionally, having an action plan on how to manage the country's genetic animal resources is also very important in guaranteeing sustainable livestock resource management, which will contribute to ensuring food security not only in Nigeria but globally.
Two things are going on over here. The first one has to do with the validation of animal breeding policy, national animal breeding policy. So from time immemorial, we don't have a policy that is guiding the breeding aspects of animal agriculture in this country. So with the new intervention of government in terms of programs, NLTP to be precise, that has just been approved now, there's not going to be any policy that program can leverage on. So it becomes more important for us to clean up the issue of the policies that are started around 2017 to look at which animal are we to be breeding in this country and what are going to be our breeding goals, what are going to be the breeding values, what are going to be the performance parameters of our animals before we can call them a competent breed to be surviving now. Yes, we know that we have a lot of genetic dilution, pollution over the years, but that's not going to be a stoppage point for us, or just going to consider it as a pain point that we need to act on. So for the pain point, having realized that these are pain points, for us to move on in enhancing productivities in terms of either dairy, either beef, either chicken or anything, we need to consider what we have as an indigenous breed and see the strategy we need to use to improve them. Before now, people bring in all sorts of animals to this country, semen, everything they can use to do improvement. There is no coordinated approach. So for what we have locally, it is a continuous dilution. To the extent that when you see a single goat now, that's supposed to be X breed, for example, West African dwarf goat, you can see nothing less than 14 phenotypes. They are looking differently. You see black goat, you call it West African dwarf goat. You see the white, you see white and black. So these are issues, and these are going to affect the performance and productivity of this animal, including our export market. That's why you cannot play there now, because they want traceability, they want specificity about the product. So when you have all these animals and they are different in terms of genotypes and their quality, you cannot package that one for export market because it's not uniform. So it's as simple as that. So retracing the step, if government is actually talking about NLTP productivity, what are we going to be producing? Is it something that is still adulterated in terms of the genetics of it? Is it something that is not going to be acceptable at export market? Then it's going to cause another level of glut on the long run, because as we are targeting the national sufficiency in terms of protein consumption, we should be looking at export market. That's when you can actually develop the value chain. So the breeding policy now is going to guide whatever we call the breeding activities and goals in the country going forward. You should be able to know that this particular animal can be matched with this particular animal, and if you're actually importing any genetics, you are importing, then this genetics you are importing from XYZ country must be able to match with this local type of animal. So that is the kind of things the policy is going to guide going forward. So if you want to have all pure white goats, for example, in terms of phenotype, we can attain that. If you want to be producing for American market and they say this is the level of protein we want, this is the level of fat we want, this policy is going to take us there. That is when we can actually harness all those markets. So that was for the breeding policy. For the animal genetic resources, National Action Plan, Strategy and Action Plan. In 2007, Nigerian, as part of the global the global environment actually signed what we call the Global Plan of Action on Animal Genetic Resources. About over 180 something countries signed that agreement. The essence of the agreement is that when you get back to your country, this is going to be the international framework for every country. Then get back to your country, go and domesticate it. Until 2015, when I was at FAO and I was able to brief them on the country status around animal genetics, so as part of my own postdoc work in Italy after finishing, and they got to ask me some questions. Out of the 32 parameters they used to measure country, my country, Nigeria, was having only 2 or 3 over 32. And the question is that what has been the issue? Immediately that agreement was signed, as a country in 2007, there is no implementation. So since 2015, when I came back to the country, we've tried on year to start to follow the process. Part of the process is that you need to do national stakeholders engagement. We did that in 2017 across all the value chain. So when we achieved that, that was what crystallized into us selecting some people to be part of the National Advisory Council. Are you getting it now? On animal genetic resources. So what we did then was to make sure that we selected the best brain, nothing less than 50 people from the academia, industry, and everything were selected. And they were the one that formed what we call the National Advisory Committee. So that National Advisory Committee, the next thing for them is to develop what we call National Strategy and Action Plan. Remember what we did yesterday was a policy. A policy is not going to activate itself. So, and that policy is just having only one line out of the 4 strategic pillars that the Global Plan of Action dictates or proposes to countries. So the first one is for us to characterize and make sure that we characterize, we inventorize, and we monitor what we have locally. Number 2 is the sustainable use and development. Number 3 pillar is conservation of what we have, and number 4 is the policy, capacity building, and institutional framework development. So now today, what we are now doing is to now look at the 4 of them. The sustainable use and development, that is where the breeding policy comes in. So the other aspect now is what we are looking at. Now we are not looking at it at the level of policy again now. We are looking at the level of strategy and action plan, so that we can now break down ones of activities, look at organization within the country, check our capacity, and now see what we need to import going forward or what we don't need to import that we have that is just wasting away somewhere in the country. You can see that the 2 documents now is like we are having a policy, and today we are talking about the implementation strategy for the policy. So the 2 will go hand in hand. And what makes this one robust now is that you can see industry are here, academia are here, researchers are here, almost every district, even breeders associations, NGOs, all of them were here. Because if you don't have this, no matter the level of intervention, a lot of programs will be ongoing and they will not have any destination. And that has been the story in the past. You cannot say this is where this program is leading us to. Now we want to have a clear direction. These are basics for every economy. So program can now be developed based on these policies. Nobody will come back to this country or anybody in Nigeria and say, I can bring in anything and nobody will take me. I can bring a dog from anywhere. No, it's wrong. Because either you are bringing diseases or some resistance issues, or some strain of microorganism that has never been in this country, and you are just bringing it in. So now we need to take it very seriously. If government is going to do a lot and maintain that there is a development of this economy through livestock, this is the best way to go. So, and by the time we have all this, government can draft a lot of regulations out of it if they want to enact law. So the guiding technical document is what we are developing for the country. They want to go take it to National Assembly. Federal Executive want to have, even if Mr. President want to have executive order around livestock. These are the things that we are working on for the past 2 days.
This is very timely and very important to us in the force, because we have been having this challenge of breeds of the animals we use. Most of the times we find our local species of dogs here not quite suitable for our own operations because of the ingenuity of their breeds and the low standards of their performance. And this initiative is coming at the right time, because we will soon characterize our breeds here in the nation, and we'll be able to know exactly what we have and what we can be able to use. I'm not surprised if at the end of the day, if this program is successful, we'll be able to have breeds of dogs that are even better than those that we import into the country. So it's a welcome development, and I see a light at the end of the tunnel.
The validation of the breeding policy, animal breeding policy, is of great importance to us in the department, because we are talking about increased productivity of our animals, and there is no breeding policy to back it up. You cannot just go into breeding without knowing what you are breeding your animals with. We want to start the National Livestock Transformation Agenda. We don't have enough animals to start, and not even having enough, but we want to make sure that they are quality animals. We need to know what to breed them with, what are the species that are good for the country, the breeds that are good for the country, and what semen can we improve them with. So all these things are lacking in the nation, and that's why we think that there is urgent need for us to validate the breeding policy so that it will assist in increased productivity.
Actually, the validation of animal breeding policy is geared towards harnessing the potential of livestock resources in this country. The livestock resources is over $30 trillion entrusted in the hands of the Fulani people or the herdsmen. So, but we are not harnessing the potential. They are just holding it in trust to Nigeria, and therefore it is important that Nigeria preserve and then make sure that the potentiality is recorded, especially in milk production and meat production. Because currently, the Nigerian animal is producing just 1 liter per day, whereas we want to upgrade it to 10 to 15 liters per day. And if 5 million cattle is milking per day, we are talking about almost 500 million liters of milk. Then Nigeria can say we have arrived. So that is the essence of this breeding policy, to actually know what type of animal or semen of animal that we can use to upgrade our livestock.
The domestication of the action plan, it's long overdue. Meanwhile, presently in the country, we have been actually working with the global plan of action, but it has not been domesticated. So organizing this meeting, it is timely, though it is overdue. It is long overdue, but at least we are happy that the meeting is taking place. The animal breeding policy document is actually meant to put in place some of the things that government needs to do in order to attract funding, in order for animal genetic resources management in Nigeria to get fund from federal government of Nigeria. Since the action plan has not been domesticated, so the government could not really plan on how to fund it. But with this meeting, the two documents, the validation of animal breeding policy and the review of the other one, it is good and it is in order.
We are here to conclude the articulation of the strategic plan and action for the implementation of the World Animal Genetic Resources requirement that will place Nigeria among the nations in the whole world that have rich animal genetic resources sufficient to sustain man, to sustain the average Nigerian in terms of food, in terms of the economy, in terms of living, having a good biodiversity, by which Nigeria will be classed as a nation that is food secure and is able to preserve and conserve its genetic resources. These are natural endowments God has given to Nigeria, and these animals are very important to us, because as soon as we conserve and maintain and put into utilization all our animal genetic resources, which we call ANGR, then there is good sufficiency in our productivity, in all our plans to meet the national objective of having animals staying with us, producing with us, and which are serving the Nigerians as a whole?
The importance of the breeding policy, or the beauty of it, is that the organization have brought all the stakeholders, including the private industry, with the government to come up with a breeding policy for the country. And the good side of it is that at least if properly implemented, is going to change, bring a whole lot of change into the livestock transformation for Nigeria. Not only that, it will also save in forex for the country, and also develop a smallholder farms for the entire country, which is a sector that needs to be developed, especially for the dairy and beef sector. The interesting part of it is that other aspects that have not been considered have been brought into the book. And this may include horses, donkeys, dogs, which is costing a lot of money, especially for security agencies in the country.
Now, we are here for a program of validation for the animal breeding policy on the one hand, and also to look at another document for the National Strategy and Action Plan for Animal Genetic Resources. How do all these come together? The starting point is that for all nations of the world, it's about an appropriate policy to drive animal genetic resources, including extracting value and wealth creation from livestock resources. And then we need a policy framework to drive this. So day one was devoted fully to the validation of the policy document on animal genetic resources, while the second day was to have an action plan or strategy for the implementation of the policy. Now, some simple questions. The first question: what is the ranking of a nation vis-a-vis its animal genetic resources? We know that these resources provide high-valued food, for example, meat, eggs, and meat. So for all countries of the world, or even for families, your ranking as a family is the quality of high-value protein or food resources that the family consume. And all these are derived from animal genetic resources. So the harnessing or the cultivation of these resources will also lead to higher ranking of your country in terms of wealth creation, in terms of stability, in terms of food security. So what is the action plan? What are the key points? The action plan was patterned after a global strategy by the FAO, which was labeled as the Interlaken Declaration in 2007. What does this document contain? It says Global Plan of Action for Animal Genetic Resources. Essentially, there were 4 sections. The first section had to do with the characterization, inventory, monitoring of trends and associated risks for these genetic resources. The second point has to do with sustainable use and development. The third point had to do with conservation, and the third point had to do with policies, institutions, and capacity building. So in layman's language, what are the basic messages from these workshops? The first message is how to understand the high value attached to animal genetic resources as a source of food for the nation. Foods like eggs and milk and meat, which are very high valued food, which affect the cognitive development of children. So the whole goal is how to sustainably harness these genetic resources for wealth creation, for employment, and for food security. So that was the essence. This is not the end of the workshop. There will be a second validation for the action plan, after which the documents will be processed through the National Assembly and ultimately signature by the President. We hope that with these exercises, Nigeria will occupy its proper position in terms of high ranking in its ability to utilize animal genetic resources for job creation, for employment, for poverty reduction, and food security. In essence, this is what these exercises entail.